Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am blessed and humbled and honored to be in space with you again. Honored to be invited to be in space with you again to share, to learn, as I am a learner, a seeker, a reader, trying to make sense and understand and learn and grow and evolve through the Quran and through the community that we're in. So I'm going to share a little bit today with you, and then there will be a part in the presentation where the opportunity for us to share and engage and in our collective understanding. So I'm going to take a moment to turn on my slides here. All right. By the token of time, and as you know, we're all familiar with Surah Asr, by the token of time. So the idea of this topic it came from a family vacation that I was on last month with my husband and our two children. We've never been on a cruise before, so this was our first time, and it was a collective experience. And so I was thinking, never been on a cruise, never wanted to go on a cruise. Let's put it that way. None of us really never ever wanted to go on a cruise, and so and in my mind, I was thinking, what is this going to feel like to be on a boat like this? I spend a lot of time, as I'm sure some of you do, thinking about our ancestors, the period of slavery, what that must have been like. And I didn't know if I was going to be depressed thinking about that. But I did want to have some intentional time and reflection and meditation, thinking about our ancestors, what that would have been like on the slave ship. And even though this was a Caribbean vacation, I wasn't sure if I was going to be in what kind of space I was going to be in. So I intentionally began to reflect and was intentional about this reflection, what it was going to be like and what that would be like, would have been like. And so it wasn't, God has a way of connecting and speaking to you and teaching you things, in ways that you don't expect. And so while I was planning on meditating and thinking about and on just the transatlantic slave trade, my mind was expanded during the time period to think about not just that period of the transatlantic slave trade, which was 366 years or more, but to think about how human beings have enslaved since the beginning of time, how human beings continue to enslave people, how human trafficking continues to exist in many forms around the world, how we continue to mistreat each other, murders and rapes and genocides around the world since the beginning of time. And as I'm thinking about this, thinking about how humanity continues to lie, to cheat, to steal, to do harm to other human beings, other people of God's creation, I began to think about this Surah Asr. Surah Asr 103, and we're all familiar with it by the passage or token of time. And this is pieces of different translations, different words that were translated from Arabic to English. By the passage or token of time, surely humanity is in grave loss, except those who have faith, do good deeds, and urge each other to truth and urge each other to perseverance or patience. Oftentimes we say patience, which is very close to perseverance. And then oftentimes I added the word in here, grave. Some interpretations that grave loss or a very painful and violent loss in one of the interpretations. So as I was thinking about humanity and how we continue to mistreat each other, and I was thinking about Surah Asr, I was thinking about that one tenet about truth and how we are in a space where humanity just continues to lie to each other. We have been blessed with a finite time in this existence. We have been blessed on this planet Earth that was created by God for our existence, for our physical existence. And we have been mistreating this planet. So I try to during each one of these talks to talk about a specific social justice issue. So I'm going to talk a little bit about climate. We don't talk about climate enough in our community. And then there's so much, discussion around, or maybe lack of discussion around, the climate. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the climate. So when I was thinking about, truth, the truth is, the climate is changing. Truth is carbon emissions exist, and carbon emissions is damaging our ozone layer. And we see weather changing around the world, extreme weather changes around the world. We see rising tides. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that macro as well as domestic. So when we think about the macro, we think about the carbon emissions that are in the environment, that's causing things like the icebergs to melt, or the snow tops on the tops of mountains to melt. Drought, extreme drought, the drying of vegetation, the drying of trees, causing them to be brittle, making them more ripe for things like wildfires. And then did I skip something? Well, anyway, and then so with the drought and with the changing of temperatures in the macro sense, when we talk about globally and far away in places like Nigeria, it's not just that the environment changes and that's it, but the environment changes in real ways and changes the way people have lived their lives for centuries. For example, in northern Nigeria, where people have herded cattle and have traveled from country to country herding cattle for years in the lands where their cattle are able to graze, they're having to go further and further south. And with that further migration to the central part of Nigeria, that has increased in things called we're familiar with farmer-herder conflict, where people are being massacred and killed because of this struggle for natural resources that are shifting and changing as a result of the environment. And this person who's on the right of the screen, his name is Ken Saro-Wiwa, and he was an activist with MOSOP, which is Movement of the Survival of the Ogoni People. And I learned about the Ogoni people when I worked in refugee resettlement in the 90s in Kansas City. And we resettled a family from who was a refugee from Nigeria, came through Benin. So if you're not familiar with Ken Saro-Wiwa, he was an environmental activist. And this is how, again, our world is so small, because he was killed, as well as with 8 other people who were fighting and who were peacefully fighting and advocating and for shale oil, as well as other international petroleum companies to do right by them. He lived and the Ogoni people live in a part of the country that's rich in oil, where international companies come in and extract the natural resources, and they leave nothing for the people. And the environment is degraded, and the water is degraded. People are getting sick. There is no development. And even in this particular case, I was told at that time, is that and again, this is of no surprise, because this happens all over when we're talking about corruption and greed, corruption and greed that impacts our environment, our humanity, but also impacts our world environment. That the company was also working in partnership with the government at the time, working in partnership with different people who were hired to kill other people in the movement. And so he was also executed as a result of his activism. And after his death, that's when there was international outrage for the Ogoni people and what was happening in that country at the time. Just another example of how greed has impacted our physical lives in real ways, in addition to how it impacts the environment. By the passage or token of time, surely humanity is in grave loss, except for those who have faith, do good deeds, and they urge each other to the truth and urge each other to perseverance or patience. So This is a picture of Chicago. This picture has nothing to do with climate or the environment. This is a picture from June 6, 2020, where the city is spending 1.2 million for security guards to patrol the south and west sides, as the population. And then I'm going to talk about, just population shifts and how we look at this specific, increase in security, and how want us to think about, as climate shifts, what will that look like down the road? So this is thinking about our ecosystem, thinking about the environment closer to home. So going back to when I was talking about climate change and carbon emissions, even though we don't think about how it impacts us, carbon emissions impacts us in very real ways. So on the left side of the screen, this is an image of smog in Los Angeles. I'll read this to you if it's a little bit too small on the screen. The risk of asthma in the United States is approximately 1 in 400,000 persons, 3 times greater amongst Blacks and minorities. And researchers from the University of Washington, more minorities and people of color who live near high traffic roadways are greater exposed to pollution. It can lead to respiratory diseases like asthma, as well as lung cancer and other maladies. 5,000 premature deaths from heart disease among minorities could have been prevented if they were not exposed to they're exposed to less pollution. And so this is a young girl who is preparing for a treatment for her asthma. Or we think about the existential as well, things that are far away, but we know that they're coming. We worry about them, but we're not really worried about them, but they are part of our periphery. So when we think about the rising tides, the rising sea level as a result of the icebergs melting and the changing climate, these things are happening. Even though people may say that they're not happening, these are happening, and we see those changes in the impact on the infrastructure that was not prepared for these changes, such as in Hurricane Katrina. And so we see from these projections as it relates to Louisiana, by 2050, the sea level will rise by almost 2 feet, and then by 2100 by almost 6 feet. And then below that, this is an example of how the rising sea level impacts the soil erosion. Therefore, people have to move further into cities. And there's always most people in most states and most countries live in urban centers, but you're going to have more people moving in that, and the impact on the population in those cities, the impact on the infrastructure, the impact on the jobs, the impact on the resources, and which will have a domino effect on emissions and have a domino effect on security, have a domino effect on our way of being, if we don't shift, if we don't begin to intentionally change the way we live. And this is an image, one of the several horrific images of people in dire straits during Hurricane Katrina. And then we have also closer, in Flint, Michigan, again, like we talked about in Nigeria with greed from big businesses, from limited or no regulation with big businesses. We have people who do not manage the infrastructure in urban communities or communities where there are people of color or poor people. And then we also have dumping in these communities and other types of environmental degradation in these parts of communities. And so we had a similar situation we have in Flint, Michigan. A few years ago, this is what we see, something similar in Mississippi. This boy on the bottom is suffering from lead poisoning from a similar environmental degradation in Alabama. And so we deal with these environmental challenges that is, often referred to as environmental racism in our communities. When we see, specific neighborhoods where there's a high rate of cancers or other types of maladies, we don't know where they're coming from. Oftentimes it's from the environment that we live in, the air that we're breathing, the water that we're drinking, the soil where our food is grown. And we're not thinking about again, how humanity is treating each other and how we need to do better and in order to be better and to live better in this existence. And so much like Ken Saro-Wiwa in Nigeria, there is some activism in our communities where these young people and people across in different parts of the country are standing up for climate justice, are standing up against environmental racism as it exists. By the passage or token of time, surely humanity is in grave loss, except for those who have faith, do good deeds, and urge each other to truth and urge each other to perseverance or patience. So I want to read a little bit from my Quran as it relates to this particular passage, when it came down from God, and how these specific tenets, these 4 tenets, faith, do good deeds, urge each other to truth, and urge each other to perseverance or patience, how it encapsulates the entire of the Quran. Some people have said that just this surah, as short as it is, encapsulates everything that one needs to know and do in life. So reading about this, originally this surah was believed to come down through the was a Madani surah, but others have said that it's actually come down through as a Makki surah. Its subject matter also testifies that it must have been revealed during the early stages when the message of Islam was being presented in a brief but highly impressive way, so that the listeners who heard these verses once could not forget them, even if they wanted to, because these verses would be committed to memory right away. And it's been said that these specific verses are a formula for the way to salvation. Is to become a believer, to do good deeds, to be truthful and patient, and advise others to do the same. It's said that this surah is a matchless example of comprehensiveness and brevity. A whole world of meaning has been compressed into its few brief words, which are too vast in content to be fully expressed even in a book. The way towards true success for humankind is clearly stated, as is the way towards ruin and destruction. Imam Shafi has said, if the people comprehend this surah well, it alone would suffice them as guidance. How important this surah was in the sight of the companions can be judged from the tradition cited from Sayyidina Abdullah bin Hassan ad-Darami Abu Madina, according to which whenever any 2 of them met, they would not part company until they had recited this surah Asr to each other. And so oftentimes you'll hear people wrap up a meeting or close out a session with Surah Asr. You know, when I would hear people, especially being new to the tradition, I would just think that people are just picking the smallest surah to recite. But actually it was part of a practice that people did, that people would depart. And so it's not something that people just said, let me just grab the smallest one. But it was actually that this surah is so powerful that it's actually reminding each other that this is our way to salvation. So this is the interactive part. I'm going to go through each of the 4 tenets of the surah and talk a little bit about it, and then invite you after each one to either come off your microphone. I'm still going to leave the image on the screen, but come off your microphone and share a little bit or type into the chat. So we look at this woman, except for those who have faith. This woman is teaching a young child, I'm assuming that it's her child or her grandchild or her niece or nephew, how to pray. Here you have a little girl who's probably in a public school, who is maintaining her faith as she is in a job. So when I think about faith, I think about, how I was taught, I was not always Muslim, but I was always a believer. I was taught to be a believer as a young child, and how just that having that knowledge and beginning that relationship with God at a young age, how that has carried me and connected me to the Creator, and has helped me through different trials and tribulations throughout my life, and how I'm grateful to my parents and my aunts and my grandparents who instilled a sense of understanding of what it is to be a believer at a young age. So what I would like to do is ask this question here: how does accept those who have faith resonate with you? You're welcome to come off the mic for a few minutes to engage with this question, or type into the chat.
So I'll get us started, and I encourage folks to both raise your hand or put a response in the chat. Accept those who have faith. For me, that means that there is a protection, right, for those that do have faith. There is there's a different set of rules, right? That accept means quite a bit. There's this, it's so rich. Accept those who have faith. Um, yeah, yeah. I've read this surah and said it so many times, and thanks for having me. I'm now digging into my thoughts about what it really does mean. So I appreciate having kind of time to in space to reflect and think about it.
You know, it makes me also think about, sometimes when I think about, you know, how I came to thinking about this topic for today and engaging this particular surah. And I think about people who are non-believers. Even, you know, I think about people who are non-believers. Of course, we're talking about salvation. And the way to salvation is having faith, doing good deeds, encouraging others to the truth, and encouraging others to patience. But even when you think about, I was talking about this specific surah on the boat, and I was speaking to someone who's agnostic, and even someone who's agnostic was found value in this particular surah. They may not fully connect to the specific ayah here, except for those who have faith, the specific, you know, line in the scripture, this line in the surah, this specific scripture, but the rest of the surah resonated with them. I'm going to go on to the next tenet. Except for those who do good deeds. Oh, let me go back. Cannon family.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to add that when you talk about faith, like faith is your foundation. And, you know, just the idea of surely, you know, man is in law. You're at loss if you don't have that, like that foundation, that core, you know, that belief. I feel like you spend your life, you talked about agnostic people and atheists, people who don't have, like if you don't have just at your core that belief, or that faith in something bigger than you, faith in Allah, then faith that Allah exists and Allah is the creator and sustainer. If you don't have that, I feel like you spend your life kind of looking for answers, looking for purpose, like you're floundering, you're just out there. And it just, you know, that just kind of resonated with me, just because a lot of young people, and I don't know if this is just the trend now, just at that core, that faith, that people seem to think that if you are a person of faith, like that you are being misguided, or you're floundering, you're out there at that you're being duped in some way. And so just that whole idea of faith, just starting with that, that's just everything. Like it has to start there. That's it. Thank you.
Yes. And someone put in the chat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that except if you have faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that all mankind is in loss except, so faith becomes the thing that saves you from life, and that was from Muhammad Azan Hussein. And it reminds him that being Muslim, but not just going through the motions, doing it culturally because your family, your community does it, it's just tricking yourself so that you don't have faith. It's important for you to, so what I hear from that is it's important for you to have that relationship, for you to have that faithful relationship with the Creator. And that he's coming from an immigrant Muslim community. So some of us have been doing it culturally for decades and for centuries. Thank you for sharing that with us. That is important. That is definitely important to know. And the reason why I'm reading the chat, because sometimes I know people are on their phone and they're not able to see what's in chat. So I'm reading out the chat as well. Okay. So now we move on to the second tenet, except for those who do good deeds. So when I think of a good deed, I think about the simplest the good deed that someone could provide for another person, and that's the blessing of a smile. You never know how the other person on the other end is feeling, what they're going through. But if you've ever been on the receiving end of a smile from a stranger, especially when you're feeling not so well, how it just transforms your mood, even if it just makes you feel like somebody has connected to you for that moment. Did that smile come through them alone, or was that smile, were they a vehicle, were they a vessel? Was that smile inspired by the Creator to say to you that it's going to be okay? So I think of the smile as definitely a good deed. And then here's another example of, good deeds. You have this Muslim helping this lady, with her bags as she's trying to make it, looks like through some public transportation space, maybe a train station or a bus station. So I open it up to others. How does except for those who do good deeds resonate with you?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Those that do good to their families, their community, their neighbors, helping the poor and the needy, giving wholeheartedly for Allah, not doing it for yourself, but doing it because this is what Allah says for us to do.
Yes, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. And Dr. Alameen?
Yeah, it's one thing about good deeds is that it makes the doer of the good deed sometimes feel better than the person that they're doing the good deed for, right? And so, like, when Allah says, except for those who do good deeds, there is this double, Allah has created us so he knows what we need, right? So we're doing this for our own souls, and that feels great, right? But by doing a good deed for someone else, it's also good, right, for them. And so there's this multitude. It's kind of like when you plant a seed and you get a tree and it bears lots of fruit that has lots of seeds in it. It is all those dualities that allow us to grow, right? And when you feel good about something, you do that more often, right? And so good deeds beget good deeds, right? And so I think there's a beauty in that.
Mm-hmm. What about, when we're trying to do good deeds and the recipient, if it's for a person, because good deeds can be in many different ways. It can be providing information. It could be working on a particular issue. It could be smiling. It can be donating. It could be giving to a homeless person on the street. It can come in, good deeds can be in many forms for your family, for strangers, for the broader community. But what if you're trying to do a good deed for a specific person, family member, or someone, stranger, or someone in the community, or maybe you work for a community organization and you work for the community organization because you're committed to the betterment of society. And it's more than just a job for you. It's a way of life. It is who you're called to be. And it's the way that you live out your faith. But your good deed may be misinterpreted, or your good deed may be rejected. How can we respond to that? Or how should we respond to that? This is a question. I have no answer for this.
Imam Tariq has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Imam Tariq?
Assalamu alaikum.
Islam.
Yeah, forgive my lack of camera. I'm actually driving. Um,
We're not able to hear you.
I think that question.
Imam Tariq, you're going in and out. We can't understand what you're saying.
Back first of all, you know how it's resonates.
Imam Tariq, can you hear us?
I'm gonna try. I'll dial in.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to give him a minute to dial in. If anyone else wants to, the question is, how does "except for those who do good deeds" resonate with you? And then my follow-up question was, how can we respond to people when they reject our good deed? And I'm putting up air quotes, our good deed, because Dr. Aldine, would you like to respond?
Just to say that that's a great question, number one. Number two, I'm appreciating all of this. Is that it's about your intention and what you were trying to present. So one thing to think about is that your intentions are what counts. The rebuke may be something for you to reflect on or not, but it's your intention that counts.
Thank you for that insight and that reminder that it is our intention that is what counts in the eyes of God. And then Sadiq says, the way you treat elders or those in need or strangers is the way people will treat you when you become an elder, stranger, or person in need. You don't get what you want out of life. You get back who you are, but you do this for Allah because this life is on loan to you. And then Muhammad Azam Hussein said, my father always told me that if you do good deeds and people don't like it, reciprocate it. It doesn't matter because ultimately it is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like the sister said, your intention is always what's important. Thank you.
I'd like to just add. Oh, okay.
Go on.
Well, I'll just add to that. Yes, absolutely, I agree. It is about your intentions and the side of Allah, but people don't know your intentions, right? And so when you have found out that what you've done has hit in a way that is offensive or that is off-putting, I think it's, it should be, you should recognize it and acknowledge the person's hurt, or if it didn't land the right way, or with an apology, because that I've been in situations where I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know that, and people unfortunately carry that in their interactions, began to manifest in a way that that speak to however they felt about what you did, because they don't know your intentions. Only Allah knows your intentions. So that becomes that, just to complicate that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And then Muhammad continued on by saying, very true, shouldn't keep doing it thinking, well, my intention is good. Is Imam Tariq on now?
I am. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Alhamdulillah. Well, I guess I'll try to quickly give my input on the last comment, which I think was really good as well. The idea of those who do good, first of all, that can be an individual application, but those in itself, dealing with a plural, we're thinking on the larger scale, the collective effort, and I guess it makes sense, first of all, that we should be thinking in those terms, just off the surah, because it's not one that's speaking to the individual, it's speaking to the collective. So those good deeds, those good efforts, that are engaged, that come out of a sense of community and collaboration. But I think as importantly, it also makes us think about, when we determine what is good, it makes us look out to, and examine what is needed. What are the problems that need to be solved? What are the services that need to be rendered? And how can we address those collectively? And how those things are carried out should be done within, observing, what are the norms? What are the cultural norms? How those things are able to be effectuated in a way where you're giving a service, but not taking away a person's dignity, not taking away a person's sense of self, right? It's not enough to simply say, I passed out food, or I gave out clothes, or I provided a particular service, but I did it in a way where people felt like their humanity was neglected, or their sense of agency was taken away from them. They were made to feel less than. So that brings me to, often at the end of a khutbah, you'll hear the khatib say, I ask for, after they say, if there's any good that comes from this is from Allah, any mistakes of mine, and I ask for your forgiveness and ask for Allah's forgiveness. So Allah deals with our intentions, and we have to deal with with the action. So if my actions are offensive, I ask forgiveness for that, and then I also want to make sure that I repair any harm, that I don't repeat that. So it's not enough to simply say that my intention is good, I'm doing a good thing, but it's also within the context of how others receive and perceive that. So that's my 2 cents right there.
I love that. I love that in that I see I see another talk out of that, just that topic, just this part, except for those who do good deeds, and just looking at doing good deeds as a process. It's not just willy-nilly donating or giving, or it's not just only the intention, but it's the process. It's assessing what is needed. How does it further humanity? How does it respond to, how are we engaging in what God intends for us to do, our purpose, by doing the good deed? It's multi-layered. I love that. Thank you. So now we're going on to, except for those who encourage others to the truth. And truth can be tricky, and truth can be contextual. From some of the reading in regards to this surah, and by the person who was interpreting this specific part of the surah, one of the people said that the truth of the Quran, that for those who encourage others to the truth, the holistic truth from the words of God. When I began thinking about this, and so when I began thinking about this surah again, I was thinking about just all of the disinformation and the fake news and the misinformation. Disinformation is information that people spread, that they know that it's fake, they know that it's wrong, they know that they're trying to push a particular agenda that only serves their needs, that probably furthers greed and corruption. That's what disinformation is. And then misinformation is information or news that people spread and they believe it's true. They believe the disinformation. They think that they're actually spreading the truth, but they're spreading misinformation. And so I was thinking about, in the context of this talk, just the disinformation and the misinformation around climate, or the urgency of climate, that we should be doing something to address climate change now, because so much has happened within the last couple of decades that, changes to our climate, changes to our environment, changes to our air quality that had not occurred for centuries of our existence, that has happened within a short period of time. And that if we don't do anything right now as it relates to our world, our planet, our interconnected planet, it's not just in Chicago, it's not just Illinois, it's not just the United States, it's not just North America, but what we do in one part of the world impacts the other part of the world. The pollution that we spread in the United States impacts agricultural areas where there's less pollution, like in Africa or South America. And again, and then that's going to impact people's lives there, which will impact our lives here. I mean, it's a cycle. It's a cycle of destruction if we don't take it seriously and address it. But the second image is someone connecting to the truth of maintaining a relationship with God, maintaining a relationship through prayer and meditation, which leads us to the intention of living our purpose, of doing what we need to do, whether it's addressing disinformation, whether it's encouraging others to a relationship with God, but helping us to, and encouraging others to the truth. And so that's the inspiration for these two pictures. So I'm bringing it to all of you. How does "except for those who encourage others to the truth" resonate with you? And again, putting it all in context again with the surah, by the token of time, humanity is at a loss, except for those who have faith or believe, who do good deeds and encourage others to truth. This is where we're at right now, except for those who encourage others to truth.
So I have to first say that this takes courage, right? And so I think we have to acknowledge the courage that it takes to encourage others to the truth in a world that has alternative facts and alternative truths. And from the smallest level of, pushing against what is commonly understood out in the world today, right? As is in encouraging others to truth. This actually reminds me of the khutbah this Friday that Imam Tariq did, and to talk about, the company that you keep, essentially, and the folks that are around you, and if they push you towards what is good. This really resonates with that. And as a side note, I have to say, I just love all of your graphics and pictures. What we don't see enough is Black folks that are out there doing, good deeds and, praying and doing that. And so like, I both applaud and encourage all of us to mirror that in our own presentations, in our own spaces, right? That is an encouragement of the truth, right? When we see folks that look like us on the news that are always doing things that are not, honest and with integrity. When we have opportunities to do presentations in any spaces, we should make sure that we are inclusive of folks that look like us so that we can bump against the untruth tellers of what we are, because it then impacts how people see us, how people treat us, how people, all of those things. So I just have to add that as a side as well.
Wow, thank you. That's another sermon. That's another talk in someone's sermon. Thank you for that blessing. Does anyone else have a comment on encouraging others to the truth? Okay. And then on to Alaikum salam.
Okay. Yeah, if I could briefly chime in on that as well. I think all of the words and terms, they encourage us to think about not just what's said, but what is not said. We say those, except for those, who engage in the mutual, promotion, teaching, propagation of truth and patience or constancy, however, whatever shade of meaning you use to reflect those words, in English. One of the things that we find ourselves doing is the listener wants to, first of all, align themselves with those, right? To be amongst those, to define themselves. But then there's also an opposite, so that is to be included, and then there are those who are excluded. And sometimes we can move towards excluding or seeing people outside of that, as opposed to including people or bringing people in to be amongst those who are, engaged in this process of the encouraging of truth, and constancy. As I'm thinking on this, I just heard you mention, Dr. Harriet, you say, yeah, this is there's another talk. There's several talks in this. So I'm gonna try to succinctly wrap this up by just saying that it pushes us to see those in a very large in a large way. I just kind of brought me back to Hodge and thinking about the diversity, the expanse of humanity. Those is represented globally, right? Those is not a small and exclusive club, right? Those should, and the way we see those, we should be looking for those, around the world, and represented, in the diversity of humanity, and, of language and culture and all, just humanity, period. So, it's large. I'm going to stop myself there, but just there's just a whole lot in there. Now, I guess my wheels are still spinning on it.
You said something that I'm going to expound on just a little bit. I don't think you were going there, but it inspired something in me when we're talking about those. And I think Dr. Taleem touched on it a little bit as well. We're talking about except for those who encourage others to truth and finding those. Sometimes encouraging others is also encouraging us to the truth about ourselves. Too oftentimes we can find ourselves in places, whether it's in the work or our friends that we have, that diminish the light and the love that God has placed in us to share with others. And we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to doubt who we are as God's creation, as a vessel. And sometimes it's important for us to encourage, to also have those who encourage us to the truth of who we are. Too often we are around others who discourage us from the truth of who we are. And, I'm just thinking about people in specific. I'm thinking, about my husband actually within this context of how God placed him in my life as someone who encourages me to the truth of myself. I'm gonna actually give a little praise to God for him. But encouraging people who bring out the best in us and encourage us to who we are to be. And then finally, except for those who encourage others to perseverance or patience. And with this one, we have several pictures, and there are many more. We have Fannie Lou Hamer in this picture with her constant perseverance and struggle. And then we have, Sister Betty Shabazz, constant struggle. And, I featured, again, I can't take credit for all of this presentation, this presentation, as well as the last presentation, as well as any presentation that I do. I always, run it past Dr. Aldine, who was on the call. I get her feedback on whether it's some of the images. I switch out some of the image or the way I'm taking a talk. So I want to lift up Dr. Aldine for her support. And I say this within this context of patience and perseverance, because oftentimes with these two women and many other women, as we talk about struggle and patience and perseverance, in this particular period of what we call the civil rights era in the United States, women were behind the scenes. Typically there was a man up front, and women were doing and making things happen and supporting, because the struggle would not have happened. But oftentimes behind the scenes, with persevering and patiently leading and doing and organizing. So that's why we're featuring these women, as well as other women we can think of and lift up. And then I think on the bottom screen, if you're not familiar with that, these are people who the lunch counter sit-ins, also during that civil rights era, where people were persevering And in this time of struggle. And one interpretation of this specific part of the ayah is that encouraging others to patience or perseverance, and it's not just patience and perseverance in general. Yes, we can talk about the patience and the perseverance of waiting, dealing with, a challenging boss at work, or, patience until we get to, that next raise, or persevering through college. But another interpretation, because we're talking about this is in a time period where there was, the new community of Muslims and the struggle of, of dealing with the different communities who were against, the new community of Muslims at that time. And so perseverance, it was perseverance against attacks, being patient and persevering through torment, through physical struggle, through emotional struggle, through spiritual struggle at, with your life, your physical life at risk. And so that's why I've these images were selected. So bringing it to all of you, how does "except for those who encourage others to perseverance or patience" resonate with you? And those words are similar. Most people say patience. Perseverance and patience are similar. Perseverance does have an element of patience, but when I think of perseverance, I'm thinking of an action. I'm thinking of the action of struggle, the action of continuing. Whereas I think of patience, sometimes patience can be active, but I think of it as a little bit more passive than perseverance. How do you engage with that phrase, "except for those who encourage others to perseverance and patience"?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
When you mentioned encourage and perseverance, one person came to my mind, that's Sister Clara Muhammad, the wife of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. How she persevered, she encouraged others to stay, in the Nation of Islam while her husband was away, and she persevered in keeping her duties to her husband, her job, her community, her children. So when you say patience and perseverance, I think that's a good example of patience and perseverance. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. And then Muhammad said, it's so interesting that it doesn't say "except those who," I'm sorry, I missed so I think it's patience. Muhammad, you may want to come off camera. Come off mic if you wanted to share specifically. I'm missing the last word. Walaikum assalam.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I was trying to write more than talk. What I meant to say is, I'm so bad at typing in the chat, is, I always thought that ayah said those who are patient, but it says those who encourage others to be patient. And what I find interesting, and I never ever thought about it until you explained it during this presentation, is it means you actually have to be talking to people about their problems and to know they're going through something, to even encourage them to be patient. So you have to have a relationship with your brothers and sisters where you even know they're going through something difficult, and then encourage them to be patient. And again, I feel like it goes back to the ayah about you have to have faith and action. You can't sit in your house and just do good deeds by yourself. You have to put it out there into the community, into your family and the people around you and the world around you. It's not just, oh, you be patient. It's encourage others to the truth, encourage others to be patient, which you can't do unless you have connections to people.
Alhamdulillah, yes. I hadn't even thought of that, but that is true, that that we have to be in community, similar to what Imam Tariq was saying as it relates to good deeds. And it's not just us, but again, it's the relationship with community. So we have, I think we have 3 more minutes. And I'm just reading a little bit. Yes, Sister Claire Muhammad was a great example for perseverance and great observation around community obligation. Understanding and acceptance is the key. Perseverance and patience. And that's when you say Alhamdulillah. And thank you, Muhammad, for coming off the camera. So we have 2 more minutes, and I wanted just to wrap it up with saying that, and again, we can all come, we'd love for everyone to comment on this if you can. We engage with Surah Asr, and we've spent time thinking about all of the 4 tenets, but in addition to that, God, we persevere and we encourage others to perseverance, and we've been patient through our trials and our tribulations. We've sought truth. We are believers and we've done good deeds. But for those of us, and we're talking about the token of time, and the token of time, humanity is a loss except for those who have faith, do good deeds, encourage others to truth, and encourage others to patience. But for those of us who have had the blessing that even though this existence in this physical form is minute, is small, is limited, is short, at the same time, for those of us who have recognized and continue to experience God's mercy and God's blessings, and those of us who have a relationship, this token of time has been monumental as well. And that we know that we can continue to count on our relationship with God for God's blessings, and we can speak to them. And so I would like to take a moment to reflect and praise God for his infinite mercy. We can share, and again, we have all of 1 minute. So we have 1 minute to share, and then I'm going to respect time that we have in this limited opportunity. Or we can wrap up here, but I thank you for this time today.
Well, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. I've just chimed in right now, and I just heard a little bit of what went on, and I just wanted to make a comment about this Quranic recitation about, it says, فَإِنَّمَا أُسْرَ يُسْرَ إِنَّمَا أُسْرَ يُسْرَ. So when I look at it like that, in that sense, because whatever difficulty there comes some relief. Some relief is somewhere in the picture. It might not be immediate like you might want it, but it's somewhere in the picture, inshallah Allah. Allah is always in control. Never doubt that. No doubt about it. No matter how it goes, always in control. I just want to make that comment.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Dr. Harriet, as always, and I see folks are putting in the chat in agreement, you bring the thunder, and we appreciate you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with the community. I want to ask, as this is a fourth Sunday joint Taleem, I want to ask either Ma'am Omar or Ma'am Lawrence to close us out if you have any comments, but to close us out in dua as well, inshallah.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Dr.
Dr. Harriet, wonderful presentation, wonderful topic. It's something that is needed for us to understand, our life and life in general, that we in a society, we're in a world that has been going on from one time period to another time period, where you do have people, because of the lost relationship that they have with God, that their souls are lost in the world, and God reminds us so beautifully, as she pointed out, in so many different areas of life, how coming back, but how the believer's life is, that those who have a relationship with God, their life is at peace. They're not going through the problems that we see that the decisions of, our young people are making and causing, fitna in their families and in their communities and different things like that. So there's so much that can be said in this one ayah, and it's kind of funny that I'm going through this today, because I was just going through some lectures that Imam Muhammad did talking about this particular subject. So I'm not going to say too much. I think everybody that contributed said everything that as it relates to this here on a general point to this by the token of time through the ages. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. Wonderful fourth Sunday address. Assalamu alaikum.